Idaho Independent Bank versus Marty D. Frantz et al. And on behalf of the appellant are Marty Frantz and Cindy Frantz. Did I pronounce that properly?
Frantz.
Frantz, okay. On behalf of the respondent, Sheila Schwager will argue. Are there any preliminary matters prior to argument? No preliminary matters. Very good. As I understand it, you both will argue here today, and as such, have you divided the time that you wish?
Well, yes.
Okay.
We have it worked out.
All right. You can start it at this time. Please come to the podium.
May it please the court, my name is Cindy Frantz, my husband Marty Frantz, and we are the appellants. And this is our first time representing ourselves in any court ever in our 4 decades of being together, and it's a great privilege, but it's a little scary. The case before the Supreme Court is about whether or not we can defend ourselves against the bank's attack on our personal assets called privity. If my husband and I are not allowed to defend ourselves, then the bank can reaffirm their taking of the loan collateral valued at $5.5 million, reaffirm taking our personal assets valued at $10 million, plus a $9 million judgment for a total of $24.5 million to satisfy the $4.5 million loan that's in dispute. I know you have our brief in front of you and have read it. So rather than to just reiterate that, I'm going to give you some background that will show that we do have privity in this case. Marty and I are longtime Idaho residents. We've developed and built over $160 million in multifamily assisted living and healthcare housing. During good times, Idaho Independent Bank was our favorite bank. However, they got into deep trouble with the FDIC, and 2 years into the Great Recession, the founder and CEO took over our loan account and began engaging in deplorable loan practices. He was no longer the friendly banker that we once knew. While we have nothing but praise for the frontline tellers and the retail managers, the CEO turned out to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. Over a year into the recession, we were in excellent financial condition with over $6 million cash in our name. We carried only one recourse loan of $4.5 million with Idaho Independent Bank. After the recession began, we had offered to pay down the IIB loan and could have paid it off. But the bank ultimately said that wasn't necessary, that they would continue lending to us because of our great strength and history with the bank. By mid-2010, IIB stock then plummeted from $33 a share to $2 a share. In a mad scramble to save themselves, IIB broke its promise and not only stopped working with their top customers, they began extorting them by manipulating loans into default. We were shocked when the president of IIB threatened to fabricate a loan default against us if we didn't agree to give him excessive loan collateral. Worse, he told us he had no problems forcing us into bankruptcy. That was on a Wednesday, 7 years ago this week. Come that Monday, he began to carry out those threats. He increased our interest rate from 5% to 21%. He ignored the existing 100-acre collateral. He sued us on our personal guarantee for the entire loan balance. He froze our credit and eventually did force us into bankruptcy reorganization. His economic sanctions shut down our family's $32 million in new healthcare projects under various stages of development, destroying hundreds of jobs in our community. One of our healthcare projects had just broken ground in Lewiston, and it still remains untouched today. It was an outrage of epic proportion we never thought possible in the public banking community. These disturbing actions created a path to make him millions of dollars for only a day's worth of work flipping business assets. Mr. Gustavell employed reckless speculation and profiteering to survive the Great Recession. His conduct is an unimaginable betrayal of the public's trust, and the fallout has cost Idahoans thousands of statewide jobs and even home foreclosures. Mr. Gustavell had no grounds to file a default action. We were not late or behind in any payments and never have been. We had sufficient funds to continue making future payments. Please refer to docket number 44252, page 844 and 845 of expert witness James Miller, who is an OCC bank examiner. He reviewed internal bank correspondence between IIB officer Kyle Hendricks to Vice President Rod Caldwell. The underwriting review was written February of 2010, only 3 months before the president maliciously attacked us. Mr. Hendricks said, quote, "Our borrower," referring to Marty and I as the borrower, "has very strong character, and that provides us with good opportunity to continue forward to a successful project. Marty Frantz is well known to the bank, provides high net worth, good credit, significant liquidity, and outside secondary sources of repayment. Marty had been instrumental in bringing over $2.5 million in deposits to the branch. I can't think of another borrower that provides a better combination of strengths that we can work with on a significant project like Eagle Ridge. The bank can consider our additional funding to Marty personally via an increase to his LOC. LOC referring to our personal line of credit that IIB gave us for developing the Eagle Ridge project," unquote. On the next page, Mr. Miller continues and says, quote, "He," referring again to IIB underwriter Kyle Hendricks, goes on to suggest that to get around this, referring to the problems IIB was having with the FDIC compliance regulators, the bank could lend to guarantor Frantz directly. Why, if the loan amounts were the same and the sources of repayment were the same, would the bank officer suggest this? The only logical reason would be to keep the loan off the regulator's radar in classifying it as a personal loan instead of a developmental loan. Again, this is strong evidence that the bank was greatly concerned about its financial appearance to outside regulators and shareholders at the expense of Eagle Ridge and the Frantz guarantors," unquote. Mr. Gustavell ignored recommendations by his own bank underwriter. Accepting Jack's excessive collateral extortion demands would have had on us, it would have frozen our 50-acre investment so that our family could not move forward with it, us having to sit on it, only partially improved. It delayed our ability to complete our conservation easement, which was valued at $3 million. That was nearly in place. It delayed our retirement home plans there in the community, and it killed a lot more jobs in our community. And it wouldn't have ended there. Nonetheless, we continued making timely monthly payments on other loans we had with the bank. During the following year, we invested an additional $100,000 of our own cash into the family Eagle Ridge property, believing that Jack Gustavell would calm down and cure his spurious lawsuit and properly reset the loan so we could begin making payments again. IIB's mortgage stated our personal guarantee was secured by collateral. The bank could not sue us personally until after a foreclosure. Jack fabricated the default and never did foreclose until 5 years later, long after his sanctions had ruined our business. The bank's mortgage agreement, and this is docket 44252, page 350 and page 354. And the bank's mortgage agreement stated in bold caps, "This mortgage is given to secure Guarantees and all other instruments, agreements, and documents, whether now or hereafter existing, executed in connection with the indebtedness, unquote. Mortgage personal guarantees are either secured or unsecured. Ours was secured by the collateral, so the bank could not sue us personally before offsetting the value of the 100-acre collateral. He did it anyway. If they had honored their mortgage agreement and offset the value of the collateral against the loan, well, the bank would have owed us about $1 million. To cover up the bank's horrendous blunder, they have spent upwards of $2 million in legal prowess fabricating complex false allegations to distract from the real issue. Our family businesses had created about 5,000 jobs over 3 decades, up until Mr. Gustavell got in deep trouble and began employing economic sanctions. Eventually, our only option was to file for bankruptcy reorganization. Since then, IIB has managed to take possession of everything Marty and I have built up over 40 years from scratch. Our businesses, our home, our cars, and other property with a net value of $10 million. We have nothing left but the clothes on our back, and we had never, ever missed a payment in 4 decades of a career on any loan. Most disturbing, bound by Jack's continuing economic sanctions today, we can never again access credit. We can no longer contribute thousands of jobs to the American economy for the rest of our lives. We might be able to get hired at Walmart or Home Depot. Now, the 50 acres was in our name personally, not Eagle Ridge. The IIB $300,000 credit line used for the 104 acres project was in our name personally, not Eagle Ridge, which the bank loan officers proposed to increase to $3.8 million to get the loan off of the FDIC regulator's radar screen. You can see that these matters are about us. We have privity. My conclusion, we had never been late nor missed a payment in our entire 35-year career on over $120 million in loans. We even had more money in cash than we were borrowing and had offered to substantially pay down the loan after the recession. Mr. Gustavell became very frustrated and angry due to his troubles with the FDIC and resorted to taking it out on us. The bank abused their charter granted to them by Congress to serve the public interest. They covered up their horrific mistake by using that same congressional money privilege to fund upwards of $2 million in legal harassment and extortion campaigns, attempting to force us to sign non-disparagement agreements, preventing us from telling this important story. Had we been doing business with a banker who had obtained TARP funds instead of turning on its customers to offset their troubled status, this never would have happened.
I just want to say, Your Honors, that when I was in that meeting with Jack Gustavell, he was very angry. And he looked at me and he said, Marty, if you don't give us that 50 acres, that excessive, unnecessary collateral, that I'm going to put you out of business. And I don't care if you go into bankruptcy. I turn over the time to the court, or to my wife.
Very well.
So, in conclusion, Your Honors, we have not lied or been fraudulent. We have proof for everything we have said. IIB has twisted the facts. Jack Gustavell knew we were fully capable and willing to repay the loan. The truth was we were in excellent financial condition and the bank was in terrible financial shape. I would like to refer the court to docket number 44252, page 875 and page 876. It's of expert witness Scott Gibson. 3 banking expert witnesses independently evaluated IIB's bank documents, mortgages, and correspondence. They came to similar conclusions. Under oath, one of them, Scott Gibson, who was at the time CEO of Syringa Bank, which is located here in Boise, he testified and said, quote, "As a former CEO of a similar bank and having been in the same recessionary situation, it is my opinion that the behavior and strategy of the bank Frantz did business with was most likely influenced by the stressed banking climate at the time, the bank's stock declining 90%, regulatory and stockholder pressures, and most likely other related issues of the time. I find it very odd and would appear that the bank's subsequent economic sanctions over the past 5 years have been motivated out of justifying and attempting to mask a mistake made when the dispute began. Such actions have suppressed Frantz financially so that he is limited in ability to properly defend himself. I do not believe it was reasonable and prudent for the bank to have sued Frantz personally, shutting down his profitable healthcare business activities. The fact that the bank continues spending what appears to be significant dollars in legal theories to justify their action to sue Frantz personally after all these years, and knowingly doing so while sanctioning his ability to produce additional jobs in his healthcare business, is questionable. It is difficult for me to understand what the bank's strategy might be and what they hope to accomplish. This situation and many more like it have made the Great Recession far worse than it needs to be, and are contributing factors to our current national debt. It is my hope that necessary changes will occur in the banking and regulatory arenas to avoid these types of scenarios prior to the next recession. In the meantime, would it not be best to put the hundreds of small, profitable business owners like Frantz back to work as soon as possible and to give the rest of us a hand to pay down the nation's mounting debt?" Unquote. Oh, I'm sorry. If this court finds for the bank, IIB will reaffirm its claim on $24 million of our assets and judgments. That is 5 times the original $4.5 million loan. It would result in continued economic sanctions against us for the rest of our lives. We would never again have a chance to contribute to Idaho's economy. If you find in our favor, justice can be based upon the facts and the truth. Marty and I want our jobs back so we can help build our family's future. Civil Court Judge Christensen was presented with distorted facts, wrong facts, and many facts were simply omitted. Please overturn the judgment against us and the summary judgment and remand this back to the civil court so the judge can make an accurate decision. Thank you for having us in your court.